Hi, today I'm going to be giving you some tips and tricks about the Kaibab Deer paragraph that we've been working on in class. And I'm giving you these because we've been actually referring to these and emphasizing it throughout class for the last couple of days. Some students are getting it and some are not. So it would be great if you could take a look at your students' paragraph and just kind of help make sure that they're on track with their paragraph. So the first thing is we have to know what our question is. And our question that we're answering is, was President Roosevelt's plan to protect the Kaibab deer population successful? So when we answer in our claim, we don't need to make this super complex. It should be very simple. We're going to use the same keywords that came out of our question and use them for our claim. So I'm going to keep mine simple and start with President Roosevelt's plan to protect the Kaibab deer started successfully but failed in the end. So this is very simple. I just took the same words and then added whether it was or was not, and I perceived that it would start successfully but failed in the end. The important thing is not which answer they chose or what answer they landed on, but whether or not they can support that through the data in the end. So one thing you want to make sure of is that there's no extra data in this sentence. This should strictly be their position without any you, me's, or my's, or I's. All right, so let's move on to the detailed evidence. So for each detailed evidence statement, we've been working really hard to show kids how we answer this question, because think about it, we have to be able to show what was part of President Roosevelt's plan, and then what happened to the Kaibab deer population as a result of the plan. So there's two things that have to happen in every single evidence detail. There must be one sentence that says, what part of the plan are you mentioning? The second part must zero in on what happened to the population within that time frame, from the plan starting till about 5 or 10 years afterwards. That's usually a good indication of whether the plan had any kind of an impact on the deer population. So if I were to do this, the easiest way to do it is to go back and look at the graph that they've been doing in class. And you can see that they've already created the graph of the population. They have the numbers. They had to create a key of the events. By the way, these are the 4 parts of President Roosevelt's plan. So I've been telling them, look, this first one, the Grand Canyon National Game Preserve, that's the first part of President Roosevelt's plan. That should be in your first sentence. So your first sentence might say, President Roosevelt created or established the Grand Canyon National Game Preserve in 1906, period. That's the first part, so that's the plan part. Now we need the population part. Now for this, I'm encouraging them to use the sentence structures about population that we learned and spent over a month on a couple of months ago in this class. And so those sentence structures are actually posted in the front of our room, and I'm just going to show you briefly where they are. They're right here. And you can see right up there, there's 3 of them up on the wall. And I'm just going to see if I can zoom in just a little. No, I can't. Okay. Well, anyways, I'm going to come back and also attach a picture of these a little bit later so that you can actually see what those structures are. Because we use those structures to basically be like a Mad Libs where we fill in our information. And this is teaching them to become good writers. Because if you know anything about 11-year-old and 12-year-old writing, they basically take data and they just string it one after another until it's like this big ball of molasses. It's like a mess. So I'm trying to teach them what are some very clean, strong structures that can be reused time and time again, because we use population structures, we use structures regarding to time, again and again. So these structures are tried and true. They're going to use them all the way through college to be able to articulate data from a graph. So in this case, the subject format in the front of the room talks about putting the subject first. The example says the number of farms in the US. So we would say the Kaibab deer, because that's our subject. And then the next part is Is it increased or decreased? Okay, let's see. Well, I'm going to go back and see in 1906 what happened. And I have my red arrow pointing right here in 1906. For about 5 years, it increased slightly. You can see between my fingers, the line went up just a little bit. So it increased slightly from is my next word in the structure. And then I state what's the first population number. In 1906, it's about 4,000 kaibab deer. So we say 4,000 kaibab deer in 1906. 2, and then we're going to see what happens 5 years later in 1911. 12,000 kaibab deer in 1911, period. That's it. That is evidence detail number 1. The plan, which was the Grand Canyon National Preserve was created, and then what happened in the population from that date when it was established for about 5 or 10 years. That's the evidence. We've stated it so that we know, okay, here's the plan, and what happened to the population? It went up or it went down. And then at the end, we're gonna pull all these pieces together to analyze whether or not we feel like it made a difference. It was a good plan, it was a successful plan, it was good in the beginning but bad at the end. But we get to make those decisions after we've provided all of our evidence. Now, for the other remaining evidence details, evidence detail number 2, and then evidence detail number 3, you're going to do the same thing, the same format. You come back and look, the second one says, part of his plan, Forest Service began, I can hardly read that. I know this, eliminating predators. Okay, I've done this so much, I can almost sing it in my sleep. Now remember, all of the details are in the story as well, so that key is just like a real quick summary. So, what I would do then for detail number 2 is say, in 1907, the Forest Service began eliminating predators. I might even want to include a sentence about how many predators it was. Oh my goodness, it was 8,000 bears, coyotes, wolves, and lions, mountain lions. Whew, that's a lot. You can definitely include that. But then you also have to include the second piece of the information, which is the population. Did the population increase or did the population decrease? So we look at 1907 and the orange down below, and we look and see what happened to the population, and we use the structures in the front of the room to write articulately. So here was the structure, and they've memorized these structures because we've been using them so much throughout this year. So now we're going to use between the years. So now they're going to say between the years of 1907 and 1912, I just said about 5 years after to see what happened to the plan, the number of kaibab deer increased from, it's about 5,000 kaibab deer in 1907 to, it's about 15,000 kaibab deer in 1912. Okay, done with evidence detail number 2. And then you'll go down to the next one. Well, what happened next? Oh, they limited the number of grazing permits for livestock so there'd be more grass available for the deer. Okay, so that's going to be your sentence for your third detail. You're going to say, what was the plan? The plan was President Roosevelt reduced the number of grazing permits in 1920. And then you're going to state your population piece. And it might sound like this. From 1920 to 1924, the population increased rapidly from 65,000 deer in 1920 to 100,000 deer in 1924. Now, I've given you, there you go, that's your third detail statement. So, I just used the first 3. You could also talk about when hunting was reopened and have that be your fourth one, or if you wanted to just choose like 3 different ones, you can. Like any of these 3 out of the 4 are fine for your evidence details. However, the most important thing is to understand that to answer the question well, you need to include what part of the plan was President Roosevelt initiating at that time, and then from that time, what happened to the actual population of the deer. All right, this is how you become a very articulate speaker in science. You have to learn these structures. They don't come easy. We don't oftentimes know that these structures exist for us, but they do, so we should be using them. Now, I'll be including those 3 different structures, which are the subject structure, the between the years of structure, and the from year to year structure as a little add-on to this document, so that you also have that information, because then you can refer to it when you're helping your child. Now, a lot of the kids will have the plan but not the population, or they'll have the population but not the plan, or they put them all together in one sentence and it's so long and such a mess you can hardly make out sense of it. So please help your child to just make sure that it's very clear and that the years of the population match from the start of that part of the plan. This is a really deep concept. It's difficult for many students, but it's a real stretch, and I'm real proud of how they're working on it. All right, good luck with this, and we'll see you next time.